Whatever's inside might be disoriented and dangerous. Or beautiful.
It started when an alien device did what it did. While it's nice to see the trio trying to enjoy themselves again outside of a mission, coming right off the Ultimate Kevin arc, it also solidified that the Ultimate Kevin rampage basically had no repercussions. Although with Kevin back, a lot more humor does return to the show.
Where's Eunice? Man, you cannot keep a girlfriend.
I like how Eunice's introduction mirrors the Omnitrix arrival to Earth, in location and in presentation. The music in this episode is also really great too. The first half of this episode feels very different from the second, as the first half is strictly based around the trio and Eunice's wilderness trip. Even the conflict of this episode is either character-based or related to the trip they're currently on, like the bear. It would have been fine if the whole episode was like this, and just about figuring out Eunice. Her powers are very cool, and a fresh way to explore the Omnimatrix abilities without simply creating another watch-like device. Then the episode takes a hard turn with the arrival of Sunder, where Azimuth hires him to retrieve the Unitrix, which is what Eunice really is.
One of my early prototype models of the Omnitrix.
And while I also like this part of the storyline, it does feel drastically different from the first half, although it does feel a lot more Ben 10. Sunder's pursuit adds more action to the storyline, but luckily doesn't overshadow the themes of this episode, such as if Eunice really counts as a real person despite being an artificial creation of the Unitrix. With all the times Ben has seen his aliens come to life in various ways before, it makes sense for Ben to start sympathizing with them. Even though they are all technically him, Ben still sees and respects his aliens as their own people.
You can't just store a human being.
She's not real.
My transformations are real and she's way more human than you are.
But this storytelling theme doesn't come until very late in the episode, so it's a bigger challenge really investing in this perspective. But as much as I enjoy seeing Ben's take on this, it would have been great to explore Eunice's perspective more too, and dive in what it's like to question your own consciousness validity.
Who am I?
You're a thing, a machine.
Liar!
Maybe this episode would have benefited from being a two-parter. Part 1 where the trio gets to know Eunice, and Part 2 where it's revealed what Eunice is, and elaborating more on her debate as a real human. Eunice is certainly the highlight of this episode, and I really enjoy the way she's written.
You didn't think it was weird when I turned into a 10-foot tall alien?
I figured you'd explain it to me later.
Fair enough.
Even though her memories are, quote, missing, she's still very smart and confident, but reserved enough in those qualities where that's not all she is. There's layers of vulnerability, compassion, and even flirtatiousness.
You're not very good at flirting. I didn't say stop.
The romance between Ben and Eunice does have a few nice moments, but it's overshadowed by the fact that Ben is still in a relationship with Julie.
What about Julie?
She was only a little too good looking for me.
Which makes Ben come off more sleazy than sweet. Like, Ben's horny levels are off the charts here.
2-to-1, majority rules, don't wait up.
But to address the elephant in the room, there's a lot of controversy surrounding Eunice as simultaneously being a love interest and a genetic relative to Ben, making many scenes in this episode pretty awkward. At first, I didn't really see how Eunice may be related to Ben, because when Azimuth explains,
So when I cut my hand opening the space pod,
It sampled your DNA, randomized it, and created Eunice.
it seemed to me like the randomized DNA made Eunice her own individual being. Like, I wouldn't say Kickenhawk is related to Liam or Frankenstrike is related to Dr. Victor just because they're Ben's DNA sources. So Eunice being related to Gwen since she's the DNA source seemed like an unnecessary way to view this as creepy and taboo. Although many fans were still very vocal about their disgust for this potential incestuous relationship. But in Omniverse, the writers officially canonized the fact that Eunice really is related to Ben, making this episode extra awkward to watch and enjoy. Although, relationships aside, she seems like a very interesting character with a lot of potential. In fact, having her be related to Ben opens up more unique character relationships and scenarios. But since there are now episodes that treat her both romantically and as family, perhaps it's best that she fades into the vast obscurity of the Ben 10 multiverse. This all probably could have been avoided had it been Kevin that gave Eunice life rather than Gwen, as that wouldn't really change the story. And although Gwen's disdain for Eunice on Julie's behalf is justified, Kevin emphasizing Eunice's odd one out situation makes for a good parallel.
You're treating her like a fifth wheel. Wasn't that long ago I was the one trying to fit in with you and your cousin.
Slightly peculiar, Gwen is shown in her Alien Force Season 3 outfit this whole episode rather than her usual UA garb. And while we've gotten plenty of forest in Classic and UAF, this location does feel different with its open pathway and mountainscape. There's a lot of really great shots here, including the nighttime stuff looking pretty good too. Even the texturing seems to have been done with more care than usual. The animation is overall very notable, but the actual action choreography is still pretty standard at first, and seems to be there only to add more excitement to the story. For an episode with such great animation, it takes a bit for the action to really get going, but we're still treated to some great shots in the meantime. I love that shot of Cannonbolt going ultimate while in motion, and the choreography picks up in the second Sunder fight, especially with all the secondary animations to complement the main action. It's also just long enough for everyone to get a few good hits in, and milk the seemingly increased animation budget, at least compared to some of the previous episodes. Even Eunice gets some action screen time, in a pretty creative way at that. Although, that flower at the end is a bit pathetic for what's meant to be.
Something beautiful.
But because of Eunice's low impact on the franchise, both with the canon and with the fandom, this episode struggles to make its mark on the binge list, but I wouldn't completely ignore it if you have some room for it. This episode offers a lot while watching, but once it's over, you're not left with much to reflect on. All that excitement and engagement quickly fizzles out once it's over, and pretty much stays that way since there's no future impact beyond that one also forgettable Spider Monkey episode. This episode felt like it had a lot of great ideas, and while the execution is passable, there's a lot of potential for these themes and characters to be explored even more, and I wish we got that in future storylines.
Thank you for letting me go camping with you.
Anytime.